Hello, everyone, and welcome to another pre-show look when we get ready for Expo East 2022. We're really excited to be, sending a big spins team over to Philadelphia and check out the latest return of innovation and natural products throughout the industry. Today, I'm going to be joined by an all-star crew to really get you ready for the show, as well as go over what's happening in the industry overall, as well as some of the latest trends. I'm joined by Jake Nepper, a senior data product manager for our product intelligence team. Jake has over 12 years spins experience and has led a lot of the development of our product library. And we're going to be showcasing a lot of our new capabilities within the beverage space. So that's super exciting. Jessica Maniscalco, a senior retail insights manager with us, is going to go over some of the latest and greatest trends in sustainability. And Jeff Crumpton, a solutions marketing manager, is going to take us through an overview of the industry. And then I will be taking us through some of the diet and lifestyle trends. These are some of the best trend spotters and data people that I know, so I'm really excited to dive into the data here. And so here are the trends that we're going to be reviewing. And then, of course, at the end, we're going to point out some of the brands that we're excited to check out throughout the show, along with the booth numbers to really get you ready for everything you need Expo related. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to Jeff to start us off.
All right. Well, thank you, Scott. So let me cover just a couple of areas that we're going to touch on with today's presentation. First of all, we're going to continue to focus on Better for Planet. We're going to see brands and retailers looking for those. So think of regenerative agriculture, upcycled, sustainable packaging, still a big megatrend that we're looking at, and we're going to see it all over our pre-show today. Clean labels are always important for consumers. We've seen this over the last couple of years that minimal ingredients are something that consumers choose, and we're going to see consumers continuing to focus on that. Overall wellness, this kind of mega trend that we've talked about for several years has no signs of slowing down. So we're going to focus on some of that today, and you're going to see some really cool, interesting products that really kind of put wellness front and center of what they're doing and some of the innovation that we're seeing. Mission-based is incredibly important. So whether that's supporting BIPOC, women-owned, veteran, LGBTQ, even fair trade and B Corp brands are really important. Consumers are, super excited about those brands and certainly are shopping with their wallets there. We couldn't do a presentation if we didn't talk about the impact from inflation. So we're going to kind of take a dive into that a little bit throughout various sections. But certainly this does impact our shoppers' decisions on a variety of different ways. And then finally, kind of protein sources themselves, whether that's the diversification of meat, traditional meat and dairy, and how they're thinking about sustainability and humanity practices within their products, or whether it's plant-based brands who are continuing to innovate at the other end of the protein spectrum. Next slide, please. So how do consumers define healthy eating? So we're looking at some data from 2016 and looking at that in 2021. And, we see the decline in this absence of certain components. Consumers from 2016 to now saying that 10 points, that's not a major consideration for them. But we do see a 10-point swing in the other direction when they look at defining healthy as the presence of healthy ingredients in those products. And so more holistically, the simple good for you also jumped up higher from that 2016 to 2021. Next slide.
And then Jeff, yep. Just to add in here, this is a big change that, it used to be deemed, we saw a lot of those like fat-free products, back in 2016 and way well before. And so you're not seeing as much of this take the bad out. You aren't seeing a lot of products positioned as diet products anymore. and instead, a lot of it's around what type of functional ingredients that I know we're going to get into are put in, or what types of macronutrients are put into the products. And I would like to call out, I feel like the one exception here is sugar. I feel like removing and taking out the sugar is probably an outlier here. But this overall trend, it's really significant. And I think that, it's playing a big role in a lot of these innovations that we're seeing.
Yeah, that's a great point. And really, it's not a surprise that we see the vast majority of shoppers and consumers really placing wellness at the front and center of their choices. So 92% of households have adapted to meals at home over the last several years, and they plan to continue to do that in the future. Half of consumers plan to eat healthier, and they report spending more time exercising and working out. And with over 32 million Americans with some form of food allergies, it's really no surprise that shoppers look at the nutrition and ingredient panels when they're choosing products. And of course, grocery budgets continue to rise with expected increases of about 15%. And even when I looked at some of the August CPI numbers from the government, we saw food at about 12% growth year over year. And for food purchased at home, that was almost 14%. So that tracks with everything that we've heard from Food Dive and hearing from the government as well. Next slide, please. So let's do a little bit of a top line of what we're looking at across the industry. So natural products are driving growth. This has been a fairly consistent refrain. Honestly, as long as I've been with Spins, my almost decade here. And we see that the channel that's growing the fastest is the convenience channel. So I think that's pretty interesting. And much of this top line growth, as we kind of alluded to earlier, is really coming from those rising prices. So you see that multi-outlet and convenience growing faster than natural and the regional independent. But I think it's also really important to understand that these natural products continue to be the industry's growth driver, and that rising prices do have some impact in conventional when you're seeing those numbers higher than, for example, natural and regional. And we did talk a little bit about kind of specialty and wellness trends. We see that sort of soften, and that makes sense with some of the higher rings there. But I find it interesting that in the conventional and convenience channels, those are still growing at a pretty rapid clip there. Next slide, please. So if we look about the industry moving forward, kind of left-hand side, what we're doing is we're taking that top line growth, we're trending that over the course of the past year, and then we're separating this into our positioning groups. So that would be natural, specialty and wellness, and then strictly conventional. And so what you see in the near term is that conventional and natural are starting to merge together. And you can see where wellness that I talked about earlier was really growing, that started to cool just a little bit, probably because of some of the inflationary impacts that we mentioned. In the very center, these are some of the core, core attributes that we see growing within the kind of the ecosystem. So some familiar favorites here: paleo, pasture-raised, grain-free, vegan. You can see kind of the difference between what is kind of natural health and wellness type positioned attributes and those that are a bit more conventional. So that free-range and gluten-free tends to be a bit more conventional. And I think it's also important to really understand that out of the 3,600 new brands that were introduced so far this year, that 61% of those are still coming from health and wellness. So this part of the industry continues to drive the growth, the innovation. It continues to be the laboratory for the entire marketplace. And I think that's really important to understand.
I think, Jeff, this really goes back to this shifting consumer preferences, right?
Yep.
We've seen that conscious consumers, everything's related to good for you, good for planet, good for people, and good for animals. And when I take a look at these attributes, a lot of those good for animals attributes are still trending pretty high. So it's really important to note how much these are sticking, these attributes.
Yeah, I 100% agree. 100%. Let's see, if we move on to the next slide, I kind of touched a little bit on it earlier, but I really want us to kind of understand where top line growth is coming from, and what are some of the other impacts from some additional metrics that can provide a bit more clarity here. So the first thing, we talked about price. So if I kind of call your attention to the green bar for each of these, you see that the price is growing faster in conventional multi-outlet. Regional is next, with natural and convenience pulling up the rear from year-over-year price increases. This is the inflationary pressure that we've been looking at. So natural is the only channel that you see that has an increase in distribution. So it goes back to the fact that while other folks may be looking at their assortment and making some decisions, natural is staying pretty much flat or at parity with last year. So that's important. It's where we see a lot of the innovation that we're going to see on the expo floor. And the other thing that I really want to call out is, the actual trade spend. So that kind of darker red color, this kind of dollars derived through promotions, is a really important thing to kind of understand along with price, because of course this is what consumers are paying when they're purchasing. And you can see that for the natural and regional grocers, that is solidly in negative territory. And that's actually been replaced with some increases over on the conventional side for multi-outlet and convenience. So really that trade spend has moved from natural regional over into the more conventional side of the market. And, the one thing that we kind of talk about internally is, because natural retailers and regional retailers have held their prices lower than more conventional players, I think that there's an opportunity for some of those brands to continue to support shoppers in that channel. I think understanding this context of just how top line growth for units and dollars are influenced by the other measures is a really important piece to understand. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Jessica, who's going to walk us through some good for the planet trends we're seeing.
Perfect. Thanks, Jeff. So good for the planet. Sustainability is one of the most popular trends and the fastest ways of living that shoppers are starting to integrate into their lifestyles. And much like the beginning of the plant-based movement, this trend has huge potential to not only impact our communities, but our world. And that's starting with small changes in the way that we think about engaging with the products that we use every day. So if we can go to the next slide, starting with attitudes towards this trend. Despite the pressure of high inflation that we've seen this year, the large majority of young consumers are willing to pay more for sustainable products. Yet they have a hard time identifying those products on shelf. And what they're finding is that language is a quick and easy way to identify and understand. And it's a key win both for brands and retailers in store and online, while 50% of shoppers say that language is important to them. And as we've known within food, certification or an unbiased third party is really a trusted way that most shoppers feel is important when looking for sustainable products. So we know what customers are saying, but really, how does that play out in the marketplace? Packaging is one of the first things that comes to mind. While it's something that shoppers can look at with materials and they have control of what they do with it post-consumption. So with this evolution also comes the aspect of how our products impact the climate beyond just the impact of packaging throughout the supply chain. Regenerative practices are also another great way that we can be conscientious consumers. And so that is all about practices within farming. So thinking about grazing practices that reverse climate change by rebuilding soil, organic matter, and restoring degraded soil biodiversity. So this can result in both carbon reduction and improving the water cycle. This has definitely been more prevalent in meat and dairy categories, but it's a topic that's been gaining a lot of traction at Expo. And I know a lot of conversation at retail have been taking place over the last several years. And then finally, concentrated formulas. These have so many benefits, and the best ones for brands and retailers include reduced shipping costs, prolonged shelf life and space, reduced risks with contamination, and overall less packaging use. Next slide, please. So currently we know that about a third of shoppers buy sustainably produced items. And we talked a couple slides ago about how third-party certifications are a trusted way that shoppers can know with certainty how brands are responsibly operating. Certified B Corp is one of the most trusted sustainability attributes that focuses on people, planet, and profit. And it continues to grow in 2022, as you can see these different snippets of time throughout the year. Another way that we discuss shoppers wanting to engage with more sustainable practices is through different packaging options. So if you look on the right, you can see some of the highest growing packaging types. And some of these ones that are growing the fastest are included in most local recycling programs across the country, such as glass bottles, aluminum, or even droppers for concentrated formulas that have longer shelf lives, or in some cases, a refillable option. If we move to the next slide, another trend that has been on the up and up, which I personally am so excited to see gaining so much traction, is upcycled. It's an easy way for anyone to prevent food waste via the products they buy, and it creates new high quality products out of surplus food. It's an innovative approach to reusing some of the waste that's scalable and economical. And we're seeing great momentum, both with items that contained upcycled ingredients. Case in point, the graph on the left there is showing a snapshot in time from 2021 of brands that use some of these upcycled ingredients in their products versus the most recent month in 2022. And you can see significant dollar sale growth during those two different timeframes. And a brand new certification over the last year is certified upcycled. This is one that Spins actually now is tracking in our data. And it's great to see that there's many brands now participating in this and seeing really great traction for those who are now participating in this certification. And some of them are putting it on their packaging as well. So I expect to see great things with a certified upcycled and even more traction in the coming year from it.
And Jessica, it's really interesting to see that these are, brands of all different sizes that are taking part in this. So it's a great way to, align your mission. What's a better way to prove your sustainability mission than by, using these upcycled ingredients. So it's really exciting to see this one take off, and we're excited to be tracking this attribute as well.
Absolutely. Beyond just upcycled, there are many great sustainability attributes that shoppers can look for in store to support a greener lifestyle. And across all the sustainability attributes that Spins tracks, all of them are growing, and we're seeing lots of exciting innovation, which surely will translate across the showroom floor at Expo. So now, if we go to the next slide, let's talk about plant-based for a moment. Plant-based continues to outperform the overall food and beverage space, but the unit gap has closed in the near term. Based on current inflation pressures, this is now a common trend we're seeing among natural foods, and attributes that have been outperforming throughout COVID and in kind of the post period are now kind of closing the gap, as you can see in the most recent timeframes. And so the question now begs to remain, how are brands going to continue to gain momentum in a climate where shoppers are placing so much emphasis on price while still looking for a balance on sustainability and other key attributes that they feel strongly about supporting? You can see in the top right that plant-based is still a $7.2 billion segment in total store, still very important. And so brands and retailers still need to find a way to support this, even though prices are inflating and shoppers are still wanting to engage with this segment in store. Let's shift gears here. So we're talking about plant-based. Now we're going to talk about meat products for a moment. So meat's performance over the past year has had its fair share of inflationary pressures as well. This is due to a higher demand for meat, increased labor and fuel costs, the rise in price for grains that are fed to animals, and the poultry industry being ravaged by the bird flu, just to name a few of the major factors. So it's no surprise that prices continue to hold high while the units decrease and shoppers turn to alternatives or just cut down overall. However, shoppers who continue to engage with those meat products are choosing to be more selective and sustainably responsible, as shown in the increases in engagement with some of these promoted sustainability attributes increasing in sales versus last year. Those include animal welfare, organic, grass-fed, non-GMO, and pasture-raised. However, keep in mind when you're looking at these, and if you are doing this analysis for your brand or store, that when you're looking at these attributes, it's important to drill down to a category and in some cases even a product level to determine if these gains are due solely based on the cost increases or truly due to higher engagement of units and dollars in a shift from shopper behavior. If we go to the next slide, continuing to talk about meat for a moment, while promoting meat sustainability, there are a few watchouts that shoppers, brands, and retailers should be aware of. While environmental impact is often defined by greenhouse gas emissions, sustainability is a far more complex issue that can be differential, but generally encompasses environmental impact as well as social responsibility and economic viability. So it's not just kind of a one-tiered approach. And specific to beef, research has shown that with each pound of beef that was raised in 2007 compared to 1977 in the US produced about 13% more total beef from 30% fewer animals. So more beef from fewer animals maximizes resource like land and water. So even though the study is not super recent in the last couple of years, it's still showing that we're making progress from fewer resources and making strides there. Meatless Monday campaign. So we've heard a lot about people wanting to be more environmentally friendly and kind of cutting down on meat in order to reduce environmental impact. But data has shown that this impact may be minimal. So just 4% of greenhouse gas emissions are from livestock agriculture, with beef contributing about half of that, about 2%. So if all Americans were to cut out beef one day a week, this would reduce carbon footprint by just 0.3%. So while it might be good for our diets and a little bit of impact, keep in mind the overall reduction of greenhouse gases may not be as much as we initially thought. And then finally, the notion that smaller scale operations are more environmentally friendly and sustainable than larger scale is not necessarily what data has shown. So researchers did a study with two different groups of cattle in a feedlot setting, and one group utilized modern technology while the other didn't. And the first group that used the modern technology generated 31% less greenhouse gas emissions than those without. So it's not always what it appears there. So just a few watchouts to be aware of. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about dairy. So dairy's performance has been widening a lot in terms of inflation over the past year. Primarily within dairy, we're seeing a heightened cost of buying cattle, animal feed, fertilizer, and farm label. Within dairy, dairy has always been an area where sustainability has been a primary focus for shoppers, and they have always been looking for some of these key attributes listed when engaging with products. With all of these sustainability attributes that are listed here, not only are they seeing strong growth within dollars, but also seeing units growing as well, which is not listed on this slide. But this goes to reiterate that sustainability continues to be a staple in this part of the store and is not something that shoppers are willing to compromise on, even if it comes at a price to them. So great to see that shoppers are so committed to sustainability within dairy. If we flip to the next slide, dairy producers worldwide are aware of the impact that sustainability has within dairy, and they're aware that there are many great impacts that dairy has in terms of contributing to nutritious diets for all of us. But at the same time, there is an impact that the dairy industry has in terms of climate change, animal welfare, biodiversity, and soil fertility. So there are 7 key themes that I've listed here in terms of what is needed to work on to improve sustainability overall within the dairy chain. So I'm not going to go into great detail with all these, but just give a brief top line in terms of what would be the focus with each of these in order to improve sustainability and what as an industry, the dairy industry is kind of working towards. So in terms of greenhouse gases, this would be around feeding and manure management opportunities for reduction. Soil quality and nutrients would be around optimal crop yields combined with adding to the soil ecosystem and plant biodiversity. With that biodiversity, focusing on the reduction of emissions that are harmful to nature, the use of fewer biocides and the use of fewer soy from areas that are risk of deforestation. The next one is around water quality and quantity, minimizing the use of impact of farm of quality of surface and groundwater, animal welfare and health you can see on here. So that's creating conditions to enable normal patterns of animal behavior. And so how that's done is it's done by adjusting the housing and application of grazing. Circular food production, this one's really important, and that's optimizing the use of available biomass resources in the world. And one of the most important things of this approach is the use of human edible biomass, such as grains and pulses, taking that away from animals so that we're not competing with resources for animals and humans, so they would be separate. And then finally, rural livelihoods. So building stronger dairy chains that respond to the market needs and securing safe and nutritious dairy foods for all communities. So those are just some of the areas that the dairy industry as a whole is focused on. And then finally, regardless of your feeling about alternative proteins, they are emerging and they are coming. So there's a lot of detail on this page. We're not going to go into it in great depth, but this is a quick guide as to the key differences between the two sources. So there are fermented proteins as well as cultivated proteins. Fermented proteins stem from a process that is thousands of years old and actually very familiar to the natural and organic industry. This has a lot of potential to scale quickly and is already being used by some brands for new innovation within the dairy and frozen products categories. Cultivated proteins are used from the cells of live animals directly and will still have some regulation to go through before hitting the market. The process is a lot more sustainable from a resource standpoint from the current farm to store meat life cycle today, but there's a lot of questions that will need to be answered before we see these items hit the shelf. So with that, that is all I have today for sustainability, and we are going to move on to talk about beverages, which Jake will take us through.
All right, thanks, Jessica. Okay, so on this next slide, we're just showing a high-level breakdown of total growth per category across MULO and S&E combined over the past 52 weeks. So by taking a look at categories in this manner, we're able to kind of just pull out or derive, a couple of quick call outs here. First, we have exclusively positive growth across the board. And then second, maybe a couple of surprises here. So we're seeing kombucha in both plant-based milk categories kind of sitting below categories like soda and water. And then energy and sports drinks, and then refrigerated tea and coffee. Those two are there at the top with a fairly remarkable 18% growth. And really, maybe this isn't much of a surprise here, since these categories showing single-digit growth are products that are primarily driven for at-home use. So with more folks, on the go as compared to the previous 52 weeks and kind of shoppers returning to categories that lean heavily into convenience and on the go and active and social lifestyle. So all in all, maybe the numbers we see here start to make a bit more sense because of something like that. And of course, we've seen quite a bit of innovation in categories like sports drink, water, and soda. These categories have been leaning hard into wellness. They've been focusing on cleaner ingredients, health benefits, better nutritionals, and aspects like that. So while this innovation, might not be fully responsible for the growth we're seeing, it may have brought some renewed shopper interest in categories that and kind of help put more feet in those aisles. All right, so on this next slide, kind of sticking to like that health and wellness note, what we have on this slide is a breakdown of a new attribute capability here at Spins that allows us to kind of look at the primary health focus featured on beverage products. So with this attribute, what we're seeing here is that shoppers are continuing to seek out products that are overtly or directly marketed for key health benefits. So, it includes everything from your more niche benefits kind of like cognitive health or mood support, to more of your everyday or common health benefits like immunity and energy. So the first thing we want to call out is that beverages that actually feature a key health benefit or health focus, those are growing at 17.5%. While beverages that don't feature that key health focus are growing at 10.2%. So that health focus, that health benefit approach, really helping to drive innovation and growth across all beverage categories. And then on our right, we have some examples of the kind of health focused dimensions that we're tracking in beverage and kind of showing their performance, as well as total volume. And a quick call out, on cold, flu, and immune, as well as mood support, we're seeing emerging very high end growth. And then hydration, kind of showing some renewed life there with a number of high performing new brands and innovation hitting the market in that space in the recent year or two.
Yeah, and then Jake, just to add on, this is a trend that we saw last year at Expo East and also this year at Expo West. So it's really exciting to see that a lot of this is translated into dollar sales, and these drinks for all different health focuses beyond just energy for functional beverage. While energy is still clearly the dominant market share and growth driver, there's a lot of room for a lot of these different health focuses for functional beverages in general.
Yeah, of course. We've seen, obviously, energy drinks, sports drinks, and then, your categories kind of like kombucha, and where we have, very heavily focused functional beverages. But, we're starting to see a lot of these qualities kind of, splinter off into different categories. And that's really helping to drive some of that growth here. And then on this slide, we're taking a bit of a deeper dive into the digestive health focus value that we saw in the previous slide. So when it comes to digestive health and beverage, that iconic category and really origin category here is the kombucha and other functional beverage cat. But in recent years, we began seeing that digestive health, just kind of like what we talked about, we saw it kind of splinter off into other categories where that digestive aspect became like this leading innovation quality in those other categories. So like in soda, where pre and probiotic sodas were, it was paired with better nutritionals and cleaner ingredients. And that really helped breathe new life into that category. And shoppers became, they're intrigued by that, this pairing of health and wellness and indulgence. And because of that, kind of soda, isn't such a dirty word anymore in the marketplace. And then over in water, that's another example that we have here. And that's where we're seeing, probiotic waters showing strong growth, thanks in part to, some ingredient and tech advances where ambient qualities are helping to bring probiotics to a category that already has strong health and wellness associations. So again, kind of bringing a wave of innovation and new options to, folks seeking that digestive health beverage. All right, so on this slide, we're taking a look at sugar types in ready to drink beverages. So in the ones that we have here, it's specifically a mix of, natural, low, no calorie sweeteners, as well as some controversial sweeteners, just to help illustrate how brands have shifted toward better nutritionals and, kind of what sweetener types are resonating in the marketplace. So the big takeaway here, based on the information we see, is that, overall RTD beverage is at 11% growth, but RTD beverages with low, no calorie sweeteners are far outpacing that overall growth. So we see, natural low, no calorie sweeteners and sugar alcohols. So think things like monk fruit, stevia, erythritol. Those types of sweeteners are growing between 19 and 21%. And we also want to call out the performance, of some fuller calorie natural sweeteners like coconut sugar and agave, growth at 34 and 14%. And you compare that, to, a controversial full calorie sweetener like high fructose corn syrup, which is performing below that of the segment. But from everything we see here, the numbers suggest that, sweetened beverages that either eliminate or reduce the amount of sugars or added sugars and calories, they're definitely sought after by shoppers. But that said, eliminating or reducing sugars with more natural ingredients appears to continue to pick up momentum as shoppers and brands continue to follow that clean label path.
And then Jake, we've been seeing this from even a lot of the big brands are catching on, right? You're seeing, I think it was Capri Sun switched over to monk fruit, right? We saw that.
Exactly. So, you're definitely going to start seeing this in some other categories, that consumers or shoppers might perceive as having, a lot of sugar. So we're going to see, a number of brands, not just natural brands, we'll also see a lot of conventional brands, pick up on this trend. And probably skip over what traditionally would have been an artificial sweetener and go after those natural sweeteners, because that's what shoppers are now seeking.
And Jake, be on the spot here, do you have one sweetener that you're really taking a look at to grow in the next year?
Monk fruit's been there, and I think that's the one that Capri Sun, went with, but another one that we've been keeping our eye on, is kind of the emergence of allulose, which has been, I would say the kind of the darling of the keto movement, and, one of those key sweeteners that a lot of keto products have been using for its performance and things like baked goods, as well as its taste. So it probably has a lot of promise in beverages as well.
Yeah, and it's really exciting just to watch, the product intelligence evolve to really capture all these changing preferences for the consumers. And this goes back to, what Jeff mentioned earlier, where, sugar is kind of that one example of where people are still looking to take that out more so. And the question is now, what are they going to be replacing it with?
Absolutely. All right. So to kind of continue on that sugar theme, on this slide, we just have another quick high-level view of sugar and its impact on the RTD beverage marketplace. And to do that, we're using another new group of attributes from product intelligence, and this is the NFP range attribute, which just kind of enables us to get these easy kind of high-level insights into various nutrition components. So again, knowing that the entire segment is growing at 11%, the two ranges that are growing above 11% are 0 sugar and 0.5 to less than 5 grams of sugar. And that's suggesting that shoppers are definitely looking more toward unsweetened, as well as beverages with low sugar contents. Again, this isn't terribly surprising, by what we know about today's shopper. But it's great to see the data truly confirm that and show us where pockets of innovation and growth might come from next. So kind of like what we were talking about, Scott, in the past, we've seen kombucha, start to address a sugar concern, but other categories like juice and plant-based milks, they might be primed for a breakthrough in this space, to help fuel growth and bring more shoppers back into those aisles by reducing some of the sugar levels in those products.
Yeah, and I've been noticing a lot more of these like no added sugar claims. And so it'll be interesting to see the impact of those versus actually, reducing sugars, especially in categories that like fruit juices, which are inherently, just going to be higher in sugar. So that's something to watch, especially as we look at more kids position products as well.
All right, so in this slide, we're sticking with our NFP range attribution just to kind of show how protein is impacting RTD beverage and how shoppers are responding, to the amount of protein being offered. And what we see, in general, is that protein, especially when we're talking 10 grams or more per serving, is kind of struggling to find its footing. We're seeing negative growth actually. But of course, every category is different. And there are pockets of growth kind of amidst that general struggle of protein-focused beverages. So, in shelf-stable juices, energy and sports drinks and water categories, we're seeing beverages with 10 grams or more finding shopper interest. And on the flip side, shoppers seem to be souring a little bit on high protein beverages and refrigerated tea and coffee and plant-based milks. So again, every category is different, and shoppers can and will respond differently to the same product quality from category to category. And we're definitely seeing that here with high protein beverages. All right, so in this slide, we're again highlighting some new attribute dimensions that were added to RTD beverage this year, and are helping to highlight, some great new, different, and innovative formats that are catching shoppers' attention. So first up, we have nitro beverages, which are growing at 14%. Now we see these, mostly concentrated in coffee, but we're keeping our eye on other categories like soda, tea, and possibly even juice drinks, where that, that unique quality of nitro would be able to enhance the drinking experience and bring a differentiated component. And then shots, just incredible growth in food and beverage at 45% over the past 52 weeks. And shots really kind of being that perfect intersection of innovative format, convenience, and then health benefits, which we already established as something shoppers are seeking out across RTD beverage. And then our last group here is on carbonated and non-carbonated beverages. And what we're looking at here are categories where carbonation, or the lack thereof, provides differentiation in a category. So we can see carbonated teas performing well at 15%, and then non-carbonated energy drinks also coming in at 15%, kind of showing that shoppers are responding to this differentiation fairly well. All right, and then on this slide, we're pulling out a couple of emerging segments and ingredients that we feel should be on everyone's radar. So over in dairy milk, one to remain keyed into is milk from A2 cows. And that's something sought after by shoppers who are sensitive to certain dairy proteins. And that continues to show growth at plus 30%. And then we have nootropics, which represent innovative cognitive boosting ingredients, which are kind of helping to create interest and growth in several categories like energy drinks and coffee, with those ingredients growing at triple digits there. And then the last example we have here is barista milks, which are currently disrupting the plant-based dairy aisle, especially as shoppers kind of, look to replicate the performance of dairy milk kind of in their morning plant-based coffees, teas, and smoothies. All right, and then on the next slide, we just want to take a minute just to kind of help understand how an element of packaging size or pack size is impacting shopper decisions during a time of high inflation, especially with shoppers seeking both value and convenience from their purchase. And what we see really is exactly that, with single-sized multi-packs, so the kind of that intersection of value and convenience, outperforming at 15%, they're outperforming other size positions that, such as family or multi-sizes, or your standard grab-and-go single-size products, which are coming in at 6.4 and 11.2%. So that's kind of definitely reinforcing that, that value-seeking concept that is driving shopper decisions in beverage. All right, and then on the last slide here, we just have another key health and wellness trend in alcohol that's helping to fuel growth and innovation, as well as kind of help bring new shoppers, new feet into the alcohol department. So over in the beer subcategory, non-alcoholic beer, continues to show promise. And, in these days, it's really continuing to show some major staying power here as well. So on a historical note, NA beer was once nearly confined to the import and domestic sub-premium markets, but its craft and its domestic premium now leading the way, as those upstarts and innovators, and kind of bringing that fresh face and kind of new look to NA beer. We see Budweiser Zero, Heineken Athletic, and then new entries like Lagunitas, Sam Adams, all driving some of that growth that we just mentioned. And, and kind of underneath, some of these larger brands, we also have a slew of additional craft brands that are kind of knocking on the door here. So on top of, all of that, the rise of craft NA beer really brought with it, a lot of new and exciting beer styles to the NA market. So on that chart there on the right, we see some emerging NA beer styles, athletic, really leaning hard into IPAs, while brands like Untitled Art there out of Wisconsin really doing their best to really diversify, that flavor and style experience for NA beer drinkers, with a variety of pastry stouts and fruited sours and on-trend beer styles like that.
Thank you, Jake. So we have gone through a ton so far, but we wanted to also get into some of these diet and lifestyle trends that are still helping to shape the industry. And so as we take a look at, what diet types are driving sales, we see that people still are looking for, a grain-free diet as a trend that's coming along. We see growth in each of the diet types, and they have all seemed to have a lot more staying power than may have been previously thought. So it's not just acceptable for brands to say we're gluten-free or vegetarian set and retailers to have these sets, but people want offerings and innovations that are beyond that, and that's really the expectation now. And so with most of the U.S. returning to school or more and more people returning to work and the office, go-to options are the key for winning in these aisles that cover the broadest base. So things like, being keto and vegan are going to appeal to people. But really, the diet that we see that continues to be the largest growing is grain-free, which has a trend over some of the attributes we've talked about before, for example, paleo, also traditional gluten-free. And so with that, we want to take a look at some of these grain-free products that are taking center stage. And it's in all different categories. So you're seeing things like in frozen entrees, grain-free products are up 75%, chips, pretzels, and snacks up 30%, and bread and baked goods up 18%. So these are categories, where before it was hard to find grain-free options. And now we're seeing manufacturers take notice and retailers using the data to identify these white spaces and opportunities. They see that they have a lot of grain-free shoppers, so they're looking for different categories where they probably haven't had offerings, and they're seeing a lot of good results in them. And it's also good to note that, grain-free has a lot of overlap with, traditional low-carb or keto diets. So again, building this wider set of consumer base really seems to be a winning formula, and grain-free is at the center of it. So we mentioned in beverages about allulose, and this is one of our newer sweeteners that we've been tracking, and it's really, seeing really strong growth in a lot of different categories. And for those of you who might be unfamiliar with allulose, it's a simple sugar that occurs naturally, although it's in very little amounts in things like fruits, like a fig or jackfruit, as well as wheat. And so this sugar has been approved, and now it's being used in a lot of things. Most notably, we're seeing this switch in a lot of candy. Smart Sweets is on the slide that comes to mind, as well as, a lot of other brands have started to swap out sugars and for allulose. We've seen it in bars. And so this continues to be a lot of the growth. It's not considered a sugar. However, it is listed as a carbohydrate on the NFP panel. So you do see a lot of products that contain allulose. They'll try to make other label languages that showcase about like the net carbs or the calories because of the allulose, how it's listed on the labels. So one of the trends that we've been seeing, is also the way people buy products. So it's not just what type of products they're buying, but also how they're buying the products. And we know that there's a shift to digital, but that's not only just going on Amazon and buying your products. So for example, when we look at something like social media, last September, one specific video took TikTok by storm. An influencer named Emily Mariko showed everyone how she always eats her leftover salmon. And so she just demonstrated how she heated up the leftover salmon, squeezed on sriracha, and then actually in the comments, someone said you should use the QP mayo. And so she made a new video using the QP mayo, never even mentioned it in the video, and still, within a week, it started racking up sales. So we started tracking this weekly sales since the video went viral, racking up 82 million views, 7.7 million likes. And we see that, it grew in the span of 12 days post the video, it grew 128% growth. And so in the following week, the sales of this mirrored that before it started to drop off. But if you take a look, it's still at a significant higher sales rate than it was pre-going viral. And so this is, a story that we've seen in the industry lately where an influencer just posts about using a product, or maybe, they're just posting about certain products they use or cooking videos. They don't even have to name the products, but we see this huge spike. And these sales are brick and mortar sales too. And you'd expect also digitally they would be, very high. If people are looking at TikTok, they may just go, buy online as well. So it's a really interesting trend to watch. And what I find most fascinating about it is kind of the staying power. So a lot of these people were introduced to it and they chose to stick with this QP mayo rather than switching back to something else. And for those of you unfamiliar with QP mayo, it's a Japanese version of mayo, and the main difference is that it uses only the egg yolks, whereas traditional mayo uses the whole egg. So I was not familiar with this, so it's a pretty cool trend. And so kind of the story keeps going. It's 114% higher post video post. And again, this actually came from someone posting in the comments section. So it wasn't even the influencer herself that was using it. Someone posted in the comments, they posted another video. And so you're seeing that the trend's going on. And so beyond this one viral video, QP mayo has gone on to be a star ingredient in many recipe videos on TikTok. So it's really fueling continued interest, from things like mayo ramen to sushi bake, to a simple breakfast sandwich and beyond. So people are continually finding new ways. And this also goes into the trend that we've seen, that started really in the COVID lockdowns, where people were cooking and using more global flavors. People are becoming more adventurous in how they cook. So it's just another way to know that every person really truly has an influence on some of these products that can go become hero products. And so a perfect segue is we're seeing, Asian flavors specifically are continuing to surge as people look to cook at home. So things like chili crisp. I'm not going to try to butcher the other two names on there, but you see that they're growing, at significantly higher rates than the condiments, dressing, and marinades section as whole. So as we see this continued growth in these global flavors, you're going to also continue to see, new products emerging, and that speaks to both the interest in global flavors, but also the idea that it's also good business to have this diverse offering. So the customer base is becoming more diverse. So having these types of products that are authentic are really going to be driving a lot of the sales. And so as we look into that and we take a look at the KHE diverse trade stats, you see that, minority certified LGBT businesses, the NLGCC is the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce, women-owned businesses and veteran-owned businesses are all growing, at least 13% rate year over year. And so we're seeing a lot of new brand entrants. As we go to Expo, we've noticed that a lot more of these founders and brand owners fit into these categories, and it's excited to see some of these brands. And as mentioned in some of the previous slides, it's also proven to be good business to have these authentic brands promoting to a more diverse audience. And so that takes us to one of our key sections. We took you through a lot of the trends, but now we also want to take you through some of the brands that we're excited to watch, and maybe a product call out here or there as well. And so with that, Jake, do you want to take us through some of the beverages, and Jessica, take us through some of the rest?
Yeah, you bet. So with beverage brands, 2 or 3 to keep an eye on here are brands whose, their core ethos is kind of lying within sustainability and social responsibility. So brands like Mananalu or Asarasi, and then Saria. And then we have brands like Odyssey and Supernatural, who are doing fun or on-trend, sparkling beverages that are going to have a wide appeal to a variety of health and wellness seekers.
Nice. And I have a couple to call out too. First, within personal care, this brand is B Corp women-owned brand. The Unscented home and body care brand is dedicated to natural, effective products that are designed to reduce the collective plastic footprint. They offer take-home bulk options and in-store refill stations. So a lot of the themes that we've talked about today. Within baking and baked goods, Salt Sisters is a brand that I'm super excited to see at Expo. It is another woman-owned brand that offers sea salts with over 50 proprietary blends. They're gluten-free, MSG-free, and non-GMO, and have 0 preservatives or fillers. And then within breakfast, even though it's not the largest category at the show, New Hope has previewed so many cool brands and so much exciting new innovation. So I actually have 2 call outs here. The first is Sparrow. This brand has been doing so many cool things with plant-based over the last several Expo shows, and they are not going to let us down this time. They are debuting a Pepita egg alternative at Expo East, so definitely check that out. But they might be best known for their sunflower cream cheese that's sold nationwide right now. They're female-owned and disability founded, and they are a plant-based, dairy sustainable brand. So very cool. And then finally, Cheap Foods. So they are another plant-based meat alternative. They are organic, gluten-free, and they are a plant-based pork product. So definitely check that one out as well. And they are a sustainable brand that are sourcing from BIPOC farmers worldwide, touching on some of the trends that Scott just discussed.
Very cool. And then I also want to call out, I know it's not a new product, but I always have to do a double look when I see Dr. Bronner's in the chocolate bar space. So it's really, talk about shifting categories, right? But, we've tried them. We know about their sustainability mission. And so with chocolate being, something that's always been on people's mind when it comes to fair trade and things like that, it's really exciting that they've entered the market. And I'm excited to try out, all the different bars there as well.
Yeah, and so from brands to watch on, the ones that I was looking at, it was interesting to see some of these coming back from the show we saw at Expo West. Very Good Butcher shows up again, which I think was really kind of interesting and fun. And then over in the frozen meals, we saw them at Plant-Based World, Wicked Kitchen. Have some really tasty ice creams and a lot of other products that was really interesting. Of course, plant-based with all the stuff that they're doing. And then On the snack side, again, Dr. Bronner's call out, we see the chocolate there, but then we also see some like Pop Art and Lesser Evil with some of the new products that are in the hot product haul. And then I just called out a couple of the deli that I saw as well. The Eat My Greens, I think we talked about it. It was one of the hero brands earlier in the deck. And then Plant Perks and Bean Vivo, excuse me, are the other two I saw there.
And then a few of the ones that I wanted to call out here, we've been seeing so much of the focus around brain health. And so there's companies like Brain Armor, that are having all their product lines are dedicated to, brain health and nootropics. And that's something I think we're going to continue to see more and more. We're seeing, Jake mentioned nootropics are added to a lot of the beverages. So this dedication to brain health, you see it in babies as well. You see Brainiac Foods is on my list to check out for every lifestyle. It's not just babies, it's kids also. And so other products, organic, like pumpkin tree organics for baby food. And then throughout the vitamins, supplements and section, I'm excited to check out Manitoba Harvest, their booth. They've been, a leader in the hemp seed category. I think, it's really interesting to see the growth. There's still a lot of confusion among some retailers and consumers about, the difference between hemp and CBD and their hemp seeds are really good. It's a great way to get a lot of those omega-3s from a plant-based source. So I'm excited to check that one out as well. Jake, what are you looking for in the dairy category here?
As far as dairy category goes, I think a lot of what's been happening has really been, that focus, kind of like what Jessica was talking about with, a ton of sustainability elements and how do brands, diversify and, kind of keep up with that sustainability message, as compared to plant-based milk. So, we're looking at like, brands like Alexander Farms, who I think really kind of like help pave the way for many other brands in that space. But that's something that, I personally kind of keep an eye on when looking at the dairy aisle.
Very cool. And so with that, thank you for sticking with us through that whole presentation. Hopefully you feel ready for Expo East. You know what trends to be on the lookout for. If you do have any question, all of our contact info is on this slide. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to meet up with you guys at the show. We will be at the Spins booth and all over all things Expo related. So with that, we wish everyone a good show and we will see you later.